with 3 key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events live as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent. Good evening, Malcontents. And I'm actually going to have to hit technical difficulties for just a couple of seconds. Actually, I can't hit technical difficulties for a couple of seconds. You are just going to have to deal with this, Malcontents. There we go. You were a little cut off there, Jennifer. Jennifer, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. We know that Jennifer, again, has a little bit of jerky video, but a much clearer picture today. We were troubleshooting it. That's why we started a couple of minutes late. That's also why her framing was a little off. We got on there. We're just going to roll with it, Malcontent, because we've got a big show set up for today. And Jennifer, the first thing we'll do is we'll start with the land acknowledgement.
All right.
Thank you, Jennifer.
So we at Malcontent News, coming from the Seattle, Washington area, acknowledge the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. We acknowledge the people past, present, and future, the Duwamish tribe, the Muckleshoot tribe, and other tribes on whose traditional lands we work and bring you the news. So good evening, everyone. Scenario. There's no sound. I can't hear you.
Oh, for the love of God. I've been muted this whole friggin' time.
Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday, Malcontents. Today is Thursday, January 14th, and it's another just... So let's start over with errors and admissions again. I can actually go say there, I admitted to our errors and our mistakes and nobody heard it, but that's okay because it happened, but that would be very Republican of me. So let me restart with errors and admissions. What I wanted to say was, and I'll do this very quickly, there are 3 errors and admissions that we want to call out. The first error admission that we want to call out is during January 6th coverage, we had stated that Mike Pence had changed his cover photo on his Twitter to that of Biden and Harris. There were multiple reports of this on there, and things, of course, were moving extremely fast. We really pride ourselves on fact-checking. And that was one on just quick little cursory. Yeah, that actually looks true. The reality is, despite the fact at first glance, it does look like Biden and Harris. When you look at it a little closely, no, it is Mike Pence and his wife from behind. And for that, we apologize. The second one that we want to call out is also on our coverage on the 6th. I erroneously stated that on the 25th Amendment, it was a 14-day clock after it goes to Congress, technically for the second time. And that was erroneous. It's actually a 21-day clock. I will say that 14 versus 21 days actually would have benefited Nancy Pelosi. The point is moot in the sense of the application of the 25th Amendment, but I do want to call out that erroneous error. And then the third thing is on our story on Parler, in our haste to be first with that out in the news world. And we were first with that story out in the news world. We erroneously stated and accidentally stated Roger Stone was a founder of the Proud Boys. That is not correct, but he is one of 3 authorized spokespersons for the Proud Boys, and you could consider him a senior or principal interest. We have removed that error from the story and have noted that on the website. And so with that, I wanted to call out those 3 errors and admissions, and we will bring Jennifer back to the camera. And now the show is actually really rolling, and we're going to go ahead and jump into story number 1. And before we start with our story number 1, a couple of things, housekeeping things. First of all, to help amplify the volume of this and to play with the AIs of the various social media engines and to show your love to our mods and admins, this would be a great time to start spamming those hearts. Go ahead and let your mods and admins know how much you love them. They are paid in hearts. The other thing is, we really have an amazing show tonight. We have video of the firebombing attack on Black Coffee Northwest. We have an amazing interview with Trent Gowdy, including an award-winning photographer with multiple pictures that he took on the 6th. And Nate Gowdy, apologies. And we have Parler videos that have been scraped from when Parler just kind of left everything all unsecured, basically, for their last day up. We have a series of Parler videos that were shot in the Capitol on the 6th as part of our Insurrection update. So this is a great time to start that watch party, do that share, do that retweet, help amplify the voices of Black persons of color, Indigenous, as well as the LGBTQIA plus communities, which are all underserved. And so I just wanted to call that out. Jennifer, what I'm going to do, give a little background here. We'll roll that clip of the firebombing and then explain why this clip is important. And then we can have a little discussion about it. Okay. So Black Coffee Northwest was firebombed on the night of the 30th or the 1st, however you want to slice and dice the dates there. There has been no arrests on there. And what we've learned this late this morning is that the Shoreline Police, which is really King County Sheriff's Department because Shoreline contracts with them, has been sitting on this video for 3 months. The video is not of the greatest resolution, so you can't see everybody's face really well there. But the two individuals, there's more than enough to kind of go on. Hey, do you know these two a-holes and the clothes that they have? But so much time has probably gone by now that rolling the video out will conveniently make this investigation harder. And the thing is, the police didn't release the video. Black Coffee had to release the video. The other thing that's happened is that Black Coffee, since the start of January, has been suffering an increasing number of threats, racist comments, racist attacks, and then earlier this week, their building was vandalized with swastikas, which is the second vandalism of that building since they've opened up in late October. Their opening was delayed by about 3 weeks because of the damage caused by the firebombing. Although the firebombing never got into the inside of the building, it did force them to have to take additional security measures. Things have reached a point that a black business in Western Washington, in the suburbs of Seattle, has had to close their doors for 2 days minimum because of clear and specific threats to their employees. This is King County, Washington, where everybody likes to think they're really flippin' woke in 2021. And with that, we're going to go ahead and roll the security clip. There is no audio to this clip. Couple of swell guys there, Jennifer.
Yeah. Really upstanding members of the community, right?
Definitely. The couple of things that jump out at me, something that the viewers don't know, is they actually threw those right at the gas meter. So this was an attempt essentially to blow up the building via damaging the gas meter and creating a massive gas leak. Those systems, though, for the gas meters are more robust, fortunately, something they didn't understand.
So this has been sat on for 3 months. They have, I'm guessing, no leads in the investigation?
There's nothing coming from King County Sheriff. There's nothing coming from Shoreline Police Department. There's been nothing to say, we have leads or we have a person of interest. There hasn't been, kind of the zoomed in screenshot of like, hey, do you know somebody roughly this height and this build that had these kind of clothes over the summer? And that's why I say as the time is run the clock, it's going to be a lot harder now for people maybe to go, my buddy so-and-so is kind of like that tall and he has that sweat jacket and he has those shorts. And he's kind of a racist chud.
It's a cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller.
So, maybe I should, make a call.
So this is clearly a hate crime. These people were intentionally trying to blow up a building they believed belonged to a black-owned, or they knew belonged to, was a black-owned business. And so by not releasing the video or really interrogating this in the way they should, the King County Sheriffs and Shoreline Police are essentially sanctioning racism.
If it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, if it swims like a duck.
Yeah, I'll say it. I don't know. They're sanctioning racism.
And it's juxtaposed by the dozens of arrests, literally dozens of arrests for, say, spray paint or broken windows at Starbucks. Now, I get King County Sheriff versus City of Seattle, different police departments, different jurisdictions. The other thing is, we do not advocate as an organization, as a news organization, the destruction of property. But that isn't to say that protesters use a diversity of tactics. We just want equality in the law. I don't think that's asking a whole lot. So why is it that precious Starbucks gets so much protection and Black Coffee Northwest literally gets nothing?
I think it's a pretty cut and dry answer. I mean, we can sit here and beat around the bush all we want, but in the end, it comes down to, somebody, essentially a white male with a ton of money versus a smaller Black-owned business. And so, I mean, like I said, we can beat around the bush all we want, but it boils down to inequality, ongoing systemic racism within the police department, within the King County Sheriff, within the SPD, within the Shoreline Police Departments. And this is like completely inexcusable.
And Shoreline has had a very challenging summer with a number of racist incidents that have happened within that city, stuff that we covered, Jennifer, before you came on the team. And the city of Shoreline and the King County Sheriff's Department was pretty weak sauce in their response to this activity. Another thing is there was a protest outside of the police station in City Hall, and everybody's favorite religious figure, Matthew, was there. Matthew tried to storm the stage a couple of times. People called asking for Matthew to be removed. Now, let's remember, Matthew was arrested because the Chuds complained about him.
It's a cannibalistic humanoid
Yes.
underground dweller.
The Chuds complained about him down at Olympia, and Matthew got arrested. We also have multiple videos of where the Chuds don't like him at their events, and the police pull him away immediately. Guess what King County Sheriff's Department had to say about Matthew?
Basically not a damn thing, huh?
Yes, exactly. He has every right to be here and exercise his free speech. But as we have seen with Matthew over and over and over again, if he is at a right-leaning event, he has no right to exercise his free speech.
You mean white-leaning event?
That too.
Yeah.
If you want to help Black Coffee Northwest, what you can do is you can go to their website. They are selling gift cards there. That is kind of the movement and the action that people are taking to help Black Coffee Northwest. And that is probably the easiest and best action you can do. They are going to reopen. You're not putting money in a black hole, but they are having to invest in security equipment that they didn't plan to invest. And the other thing, Jennifer, I think people need to remember, this is a student-run organization. Their president, I believe, is 17 years old. I say I believe because I don't know if she's had a birthday yet at this point. It's become 18. But I know when they opened their doors, she was 17 years old.
So do they know when they're opening back up again?
The plan is Saturday, but I would say you'll have to monitor their socials. And they are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Of what I have seen, they're super active on Instagram. They're super active on Facebook. Not so much on Twitter.
Okay.
One of our
Saturday
mods or admins, you could drop a link in there for Black Coffee Northwest. And you know what? Let's run the Black Coffee Northwest spot, and then we'll go to our next story.
Black Coffee is a hub for communities and a hub for meeting people, making friends, and understanding.
What Black Coffee is to me is a place to actually call home, a place where Black youth will feel welcomed, where Black families will come and feel like they're at home.
What we're trying to build is more than just coffee. Community is something that we do naturally. We know who's in the community, we know what the deficits are, and we're trying to fix that. We want to bring people together.
My hope is that the phrase grounded in excellence shows up everywhere and that it becomes a movement.
I'm looking forward to hanging out at Black Coffee with my friends and feeling safe.
Black coffee to me means opportunity for people like me and my other friends and family to come here and do homework safely and hang out and stuff like that.
That is happening. It is happening.
I'm looking forward to hanging out with my friends and feeling safe. I don't know how Black America functions, and yet they continue to function and try to rise above in this environment.
Yeah. It's like the epitome of strength and resilience when it shouldn't have to be that much strength and resilience and suffering. But Saturday seems like a good day. I hope they open back up, and it seems like a good time for people to try out a new coffee place and support a small locally owned Black business.
Yeah, Black Coffee is located on Shoreline on Highway 99. I don't think it's called Aurora Avenue that far north up in the Shoreline, but they're on Highway 99. They're right around 175th. If you're heading north from Seattle, they'll be on the left-hand side of the road. And I think they're like between 170th and 175th or 175th and 180th. They're somewhere between 180th and 170th. There will be a big, long-ass line. When they are open, go early and get a potato scone. They are the food of the gods. And with that, we're going to go ahead and roll into our next story. We have a very special edition of Behind the Pole tonight. Some of you may be scratching your head because Behind the Pole typically happens when we're out in the field and we are covering something live, and things start to go a little sideways, and we have multiple cameras that show additional angles and additional stories on what is happening. And so this is not the case today, because some of you be like, you guys haven't streamed out in the field for a while. No, it's not. We have a special guest for Behind the Pole tonight, and our guest is Nate Gowdy. Nate Gowdy is probably best known for a Time magazine cover with a picture of Bernie Sanders on it. Nate has been working on creating a book through the Trump administration, which he talks about, and Nate was in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. We had an opportunity, thanks to our Renee, our field producer, who set this up, to interview Nate. We wanted to run a shorter clip, but our interview, like the long clip with him, is almost 30 minutes. And he provided us 34 pictures, which we will publish out on our website. Probably tomorrow, maybe on Saturday. I only kind of waffle because I don't know what the news cycle is. And with that, I'm going to go. We don't have a 30-minute interview. We have a very cut down version of that. We will publish the full version of that interview out on Monday. But with that, let's roll Behind the Pole with Nate Gowdy. We're with Nate Gowdy, photographer out of Seattle, who is probably most famous for his cover photograph that was featured on Time magazine. Nate was in Washington, D.C. during the insurrection that occurred on January 6th. Nate, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, happy to be here, David.
Nate, you provided us with 34 different images on the events. We're going to talk about a few of those a little bit further in. What I wanted to talk to you first about was, why did you decide to go to Washington, D.C.?
David, I went to Washington, D.C. Because I could, and more importantly, because I've been working on a long-term project documenting presidential politics and protest in the age of Trump. And I've covered more than 300 events across 23 states. And this is the conclusion, the final narrative for my book.
So, Nate, just so our viewers know, you actually did not go into the Capitol, but you were on the Capitol grounds as the situation turned into a full-scale insurrection.
Yeah, I was on the side of the inaugural stage. I believe most of the demonstrators who breached the inside of the Capitol came in through the front. And because our reception was so bad, or my reception, everyone's reception, I wasn't monitoring the news, and it was literally anarchy out there.
Nate, is there a story that jumps out in your mind on something that your camera didn't catch, but that's something your eyes and mind caught? And what would that story be?
So I have tunnel vision on the stills, but I do wish at times I would have turned my phone camera on. Parts that stick out are when the mob found out a woman was tragically shot and killed inside the Capitol. The whole crowd started chanting, "I can't breathe." That struck me. They like to take a lot of leftist slogans and acronyms, and they like to repurpose them and in a way to antagonize their opposition. Other things you can't see in the pictures is these people were organized. They had step ladders, they had huge banners, they were ready to unfurl. They knew exactly what they were doing. There was a contingent of Proud Boys militiamen I I caught walking toward the Capitol in the AM when the National Mall was empty. It was barren because everyone, all the day's demonstrators were at Trump at his morning address between the Washington Monument and the White House, and I saw them. I came across them on my way there, marching in the opposite direction. When the mob breached barrier after barrier toward the inaugural stage, well, there would have had to have been another contingent of Proud Boys around the front. And so they were already divided up. And so basically they marched to a crowd of no one, literally almost no one, chanting F-word Antifa. And there may have been another photographer at some point, another photographer or two, but at first I was the only photographer I knew of. And they were threatening me. And when I said I was, media for Rolling Stone, they made fun of me and still assumed plenty of them seemed to assume I was Antifa. And so I once I realized the danger, because I photographed them before, and at first I was kind of like right in the middle of their crowd, but they were getting really hostile and they're easily triggered. And so I started keeping my distance a little more. And so they marched toward the Capitol, they kneeled and prayed, and then they broke for lunch. we had ended up near a bunch of food trucks, and so it was lunchtime, and so everyone went and got hot dogs and tacos or whatever, and then they reconvened. They merged with the general populace, and then the insurrection, the attack, it happened so fast. It took a little bit for it to dawn on me what was happening.
Let's talk about a couple of the photos that you had sent over. You'd sent us over a collection of 34 photos. One of them here, the first one we want to talk about is the first photo in this collection of 34 you sent.
Yeah, so normally the Proud Boys they have their trademark black polos with white trim. There is not one of those to be seen on January 6th. And the Proud Boys had telegraphed their intentions ahead of time, saying they had planned to be incognito, even wearing black and trying to mimic the look of Black Bloc. I can see why they maybe did that, because they didn't want to be labeled as Proud Boys, perhaps, with what they were intending to do. But they did have shirts that said Enrique Tarrio did nothing wrong. At one point I asked the leader, which was Rufio, I'm sure you've encountered him here in Seattle. I think he's one of the local Proud Boys from Vancouver, Washington, or wherever he's from. He was leading them in Enrique's absence. And I asked him, is there a quote? I took your photo. Is there something you want to say, for words to put with the photo, pair with the photo? And he said, all he wanted to say was back the yellow.
On the subject of back the yellow, we've seen a number of videos that have come out of the insurrection in the Capitol, where Capitol Police were being taunted, were being told that Republicans hate you, that you should just quit your jobs. We don't back the blue anymore because who do you serve? Did you see any of that? And then what was the expression, the body language? I mean, how did the police react to all of this?
Sure, great question. So they were almost pleading in the front. They were almost pleading with police, letting them know, trying to let them know that they're on the same side. And, like, hey, we don't want to hurt you. We don't want to fight you. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist. And basically they're like, hey, we don't want, don't make us do this. We don't want to have to do this. And so, and meanwhile, and I didn't capture it in a single photo, but, there are Blue Lives Matter, they're waving Blue Lives Matter flags. Meanwhile, they're attacking, they're pepper spraying, they're terrorizing the police forces who, frankly, had their kids' gloves on. From what I witnessed, they were doing their best to repeatedly de-escalate. And I've never seen that level in the last year of protests. I've never seen that level of restraint from, Seattle PD.
I saw one video clip where Capitol Police officers dressed in full riot gear are evacuating out of the Capitol. They're walking through a crowd. They're being completely taunted. One officer, they all look very grim-faced and defeated. And one officer, when the insults are getting hurled, turns and it's like, I've seen that turn, right? And it's like, oh, here we go. And the other officers are just pushing them, because the reality is they were so deep in a mob that it would have not gone well, which is probably the tactical reason. It was just like, buddy, keep moving.
They were overwhelmed. They needed backup, and and I guess that comes from on high, and Trump obviously didn't want to call in backup, and because they were drastically overwhelmed, and it's just really something seeing photos from BLM protests this summer outside the Capitol compared to the 6th. It's quite a contrast. They were not only outmanned, but they just weren't prepared in the least. I'm still processing what I saw. I mean, the U.S. Capitol being overwhelmed by an anti-democracy protest of a mob of people who were egged on by their ringleader, the President Trump.
You were telling me that you witnessed essentially some human wave attacks against the police. Could you talk a little bit about that too?
Yeah. So when you get into the epicenter of the inaugural stage, there's a 5-foot wall, and there were a lot of barriers before that wall. And what they would do is they would lean the barriers up against the wall and use the barriers as a ladder. While they were getting pepper sprayed, those people would fall back, recover, and while they fall back, a new wave of people would push in, and they were just kind of come on, we need to do this and keep up holding the line and pushing in, and they were successful.
Nate, you're talking about persons of color there. You have this picture that you took, which is number 14 in the images that you sent to us. Go ahead and tell me the story behind that image.
I guess I don't know. There's not too much story to that for me. It just kind of she was looking back toward the crowd, kind of doing what I was doing, doing a panorama with her phone. But what makes that image distinctive is she was one of very, very, very few people of color in the crowd who were there to support their president.
Nate, as I've experienced, and I know you've experienced, protests of any, whether they're on the left or the right or the middle, if it's a large protest, they can attract some interesting people. And on the photo number 34 you sent to us, there is a interesting individual who is holding 3 different signs with a lot of, it's anti-Semitic at the end of the day, although he just doesn't come out and say it's anti-Semitic. It's as anti-Semitic as you can get. Could you tell us a little bit about interesting anti-Semitic guy?
Well, once I photographed him, he wasn't on the front lines and he wasn't part of the insurrection, directly part of the insurrection, but you always get characters, and everyone, I'd say everyone around me that day was on the fringes, social, politically, but this guy is on a different, and also on the fringes in a maybe crazy, different kind of crazy way. And he, once I photographed him, that was one of my last pictures. I'd been out there since 9:30 a.m. I think it was close to 8 p.m. I hadn't used the restroom all day. I'd been on my feet. I've been dealing with threats all day. And so once I took his picture, it's like, I think I'm coming home.
We've been talking to Nate Gowdy, and this has been a very special episode of Behind the Poll. Nate, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, David. I look forward to, and when things calm down, getting a beer sometime.
I would look forward to that. Absolutely. I appreciate that. We'll definitely take you up on that offer. Thank you. Great interview there with Nate. And yes, that was previously recorded. We did that interview today. Excuse me. We're going to, the whole interview is actually almost 30 minutes. There's a fair amount that we had to put on the cutting floor in the interest of keeping this digestible for the show. One of the other things that is really fascinating, and you'll have to come and watch the full version of the interview, and there'll be more pictures in that version. We almost didn't get to see any of those pictures at all. They were almost all lost, and there's a story behind that. And if you want to hear the story behind that story, you're going to have to tune in for that story. And with that, we're going to do a little pause for the cause. Hi, Malcontents. I'm David, the Malcontent, and I'd like to talk to you for a moment about supporting independent media. When you support us, you help us bring the before, during, and after. You help us defend the First Amendment. You help us amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices, and you help us hold leaderships at a local, state, and federal level accountable. None of this would be possible without support by viewers just like you. When you become a patron for as little as $5 a month, you help buy technology, safety equipment, and help cover travel expenses so that we can continue to bring you news that you trust. If you can't become a patron, you can do a one-time donation on Venmo, and your dollars will go to the exact same causes. With your continued support, we can continue to amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices while showing the truth on what is happening in the world around us. Once again, thank you. If you really, we're seeing the comments and we're seeing all of the praise for the interview and the photos, and this wouldn't have been possible if it was not for our patrons and the people that support us on Venmo. And one of the things I want to call out is if you become a patron, you will get early access to our documentary, which is Can You Hear Us?, which is about the events in Seattle from June 1 to July 4. And that will become available in advance to our patrons on January 25th. And then at any level, so even at the $5 level, you will get early access to Can You Hear Us? And then it will become generally available at the end of February. Jennifer, amazing pictures, amazing story.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's a great interview to watch. What a wonderful interview, and like what an experience to be there. But I feel like, perhaps it really hasn't like fully sunk in yet, because there's a whole lot of like, how do you, I guess, cope with that kind of experience? How do you make sense of it? And he says at one point that, he's still trying to make sense of everything that happened. But to be in the midst of that and to really see what's going on, and then talking about them being organized and prepared and having these things like step ladders and things. And you have to wonder, how is it that many people were able to coordinate at that level from so far across the country and have those kinds of resources and supplies? And I think that's a really interesting question that, it's going to take a very, very long time to answer if we ever fully get that answered. Your sound's off again. I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Jennifer, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
What I was saying is that Nate is going to be going back to Washington, D.C. for the inauguration. And,
wow.
He will be in the belly of the beast. And this will be, the conclusion of his book, because he started in 2015. And unless we plunge somehow into dictatorship, we will. His book will come to an end with the inauguration of Joe Biden.
I'm really actually excited for this book, because as a historian, you can get so much out of a picture. So I think these kind of books are far underrated. And so I'm really, really kind of excited to kind of see this story in pictures.
So we will be, as I said, sharing the collection of photos that Nate has provided. We'll be sharing that on our website. There are additional photos that he has provided that we don't have to Rolling Stone magazine. So look for Rolling Stone magazine, and Nate's work will be covered in there. And with that, we're going to go to our next story. And our next story is a COVID update, because it's real easy with everything else that's going on to forget that 4,000 Americans right now are dying on the daily from COVID, sadly, kind of as predicted for January. And those numbers are probably going to continue to get worse as we move towards the end of the month. Couple of things here, which I just want to jump in. This is a good time. Our mods and admins are not paid. Nobody here is paid. We are paid with hearts. And so if you really appreciate independent media, like the stories that you're hearing, this is a good time to spam those hearts. Spam them up on Facebook, Twitter, and Periscope. If you're watching us on YouTube or Twitch, you could just do a long line of hearts or like I love you mods, and they really appreciate that kind of stuff. The other thing is we are aware that Jennifer's camera is a little we got some bandwidth issues. There's nothing we can do, so we're just working through it. Jennifer, why don't you give us our COVID update?
Oh, it was so hard to sum this up in 5 facts because there's so much going on. But I'm going to do my best. So yesterday, CNN reported that the U.S. reached the record for number of COVID-related deaths at 4,197. This is the highest death toll since the beginning of the pandemic, and the overall death toll now rests at about 386,000. Earlier this week, this is fact number 2, WHO, the World Health Organization, declared that herd immunity would not be attainable this year due to the issues with the vaccine rollout and vaccine administration. Fact number 3, earlier today, NBC reported on a new U.S.-specific strain of COVID that is far more contagious and believed to be behind half of the nation's COVID infections. Number 4, both Dr. Fauci and Eli Lilly expressed concerns earlier this week that the South African strain of COVID has more dramatic protein spikes that raise questions about both vaccine efficacy and the efficacy of antibody treatments given to people recently diagnosed with COVID, meant to help them recover faster and avoid long hospitalizations. And fact number 5, as of today, 3 U.S. lawmakers, including Bonnie Watson-Coleman, Pramila Jayapal from Washington, and Brad Schneider, have tested positive for COVID after sheltering with other unmasked lawmakers during the Capitol insurrection. Good news, though, and hopefully it passes. Biden introduced details for his $1.9 trillion stimulus plan today, which includes $160 billion to bolster vaccination and testing efforts.
One of the things that jumped out at me on these 5 fast facts in the $1.9 trillion package is that Republicans all of a sudden, as we predicted, care about the national deficit again.
Oh, yes, of course. We're back to worrying about the tab, which seems like a really, I mean, it's kind of their thing, especially when there's a Democratic president. But it just seems like such a bad timing to be worried about that when you're basically on the verge of an economic crisis as a result of a global pandemic that was basically ignored by the previous administration. Now is not the time to be worried about purse strings, right?
Right. Yeah, the Trump administration in 3 3/4 years, because we don't know what the deficit growth will be for this final quarter until a quarter after he leaves. His deficit growth has been $7.1 trillion. Now, I know that the chuds,
cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers,
are going to quickly say, yeah, but Obama grew at $8.6 trillion. He grew at $8.6 trillion over 8 years, and almost all of that was in the first 3 years because he was given a completely destroyed economy when he became president of the United States in early 2009, inheriting the worst economic, actually the second worst economic downturn since the Great Depression, because Donald Trump gave us the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression.
Yeah, exactly. And for some reason, that rationale just falls on deaf ears. With Trump supporters, there's a big difference in 4 versus 8 years. And the fact that, you're only talking about really slightly less money over the duration of Trump's 4-year term versus Obama's 8-year term. The facts just don't add up to them for some reason. I don't know why.
And for the records, chuds, I didn't vote for Obama either time. So, no, you're an Obama lover in the comments. Sorry, chuds. The other thing I will toss out there is that Obama was willing to work across the aisle that he essentially took the Bush economic recovery plan, the Bush economic recovery architects, put them in his administration, and largely just executed the Bush 43 plan.
Yeah, exactly. again, those kind of facts fall on deaf ears when it comes to Trump supporters, because it just doesn't align with the narrative that they've created.
Yeah, it doesn't. The other thing that jumps out at me is this growing chorus, right? We had this thing with Sir John Bell maybe about 10 days ago about the South African variant and his concern that it was resistant. Well, you won't want to say that the vaccination won't work on this strain, but it is more resistant on this strain. And we're starting to see a chorus of voices starting to say this.
Yeah, and it's not just the vaccine, it's the antibody treatments, right? Because of the different types of protein spikes that are on the South African strain. And as of now, I was looking before we went on air, they haven't seen any of the South African strain in the US that I'm aware of. But with the way in which it's traveling and, the rate of contagiousness of these new strains, it's only a matter of time before it comes here. And the fact that we now have a US specific strain that's accounting for half the cases in the nation is really troubling, because how long before ours starts to mutate in that same way?
The other thing that I think people need to understand is when you have something increase in its virulence, its ability to spread, or I should say its contagiousness, but the virulence doesn't increase, that is actually when you get a lot of problems, because you get this very fast spread that makes people really sick, and people that are hospitalized and need all these drugs and need oxygen and 4 people to help keep them alive. If you look at a disease, say like Ebola, the reason we've never had like a global outbreak of Ebola is so lethal that it tends to kill the hosts that are carrying it around. And so it has a harder time getting this really rapid community spread like we see in a disease like COVID-19.
Yeah, no, exactly. And again, this just goes back to, we haven't even begun to see the cases that have come out of the insurrection. If you, watch the video, the majority of those people are not wearing masks. How many people did they come into contact with? How many people did they potentially spread it to if they were infected? So there's a whole lot of unknown variables at this point, and it just reinforces the need to wear a mask to protect yourself and to protect others, and to continue to abide by social distancing and hand washing and all of the protocols put in place, because who made this very very alarming statement earlier in the year earlier this week that we're not going to reach herd immunity this year. That's a whole nother year of having to continue these practices. And when people don't follow those regulations, that further prolongs, our isolation and, economic downturn and all of these things that are profoundly affecting people.
Yeah, Washington State has the highest mask compliance in the United States. And I'm like, really? When I heard that. But apparently we have the highest mask compliance in the United States. Jennifer, thank you so much for that update. We're going to go ahead and roll a spot, and then we're going to go to story number 4.
Okay.
To the side. Music has a power greater than words can really express. Songbird, sing a song to me. Let me know where I'm supposed to be. It's such a shame, well, I was your TV girl. The EP is called Blue, and my website is classicelishamusic.com.
I just want to say I want COVID to end sooner so I can have a production engineer in the studio here with me again instead of having to be chief cook and bottle washer. Classic Alicia's album is available on the website. It's also available on Bandcamp and in iTunes. So if you use a iDevice and you have iTunes, it's literally just a button click to download her EP, Blue. If you go to, it's $13. If you go to her website, you can get a CD with a bonus track, and that CD is $15. She has an amazing voice. She is an amazing spirit. And feel so privileged that we had a chance to literally amplify her voice back on August 9th when the weather here was much nicer.
Mm-hmm. I'm not going to complain. The last couple of days have been fairly nice and really made me long for spring again. But then, of course, I was reading a COVID article and they're like, it could intensify again in spring when people get out more. And I was like, oh, great.
Yay. One little thing actually before we jump into your story, which I actually feel is good news on COVID. And I think people are going to be a little surprised when I come up, when I mention this. The state of Washington has finally stepped back on what I think was a mistake in their interpretation on outdoor seating, and that restaurants that have like the large garage doors. So in Kirkland, there's George's that's like that. There's also the Bungalow where they have the large garage doors that they could open up and just let the air circulate in. As long as people are sitting at that row that is on that open and exposed side, and there's like some cross circulation, those restaurants are allowed to have indoor seating again. It's very limited seating, no more than 25%. They can't sit people further back. But I know a lot of people are just very happy about that because people are craving for some semblance of normalcy. But I will say, eating at a restaurant is one of the highest vector points for getting sick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely nice to have that little bit of normalcy back as long as people don't abuse it, right?
Exactly. And with that, we're going to go to story number 4.
Okay.
Well, one thing's for sure, Jennifer, John Sullivan is probably in some sick and demented way that a lot of people in America know his name tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, we're going to watch this clip here shortly, but I don't understand this guy's end game. I really don't.
Yeah. And so to give you a little background here, John Sullivan, we're going to dive into tonight who is John Sullivan. Max Blumenthal has done tremendous research on this that he released earlier today. And here in Seattle, working with activists in Salt Lake City, where John is from, Rebellion Baby, that's their handle on Twitter. They have done tremendous research on John Sullivan, and they have painted a very interesting picture. John was a central figure in a number of videos that were shot on the Capitol. He was also right there when Ashley Babbitt was shot. He was the individual that told the police officers, and in some ways he is partially culpable in getting shot because he was the one telling them, you just need to leave or you're going to get hurt. Just walk away, right? He was in total road warrior mode. Just walk away. Just walk away. And they just walked away. And surprise, surprise, 30 seconds later, Ashley Babbitt is dead on the floor.
Yeah, no, it's insane to me. First off, why are these people listening to him? Second, I think we have the clip later from the parlor, and he's in quite a bit of that, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. He's like all over the place.
And he's totally got, contradicting things going on. I mean, the whole entire thing, that was stunning to me. Those clips were stunning to me. But yeah, this person is a very interesting character in a alarming way. So I'm glad that people are kind of digging in and trying to figure out what's going on in that head of his.
Exactly. And John Sullivan was arrested today in Utah on federal charges, on a litany of charges for his actions on January 6th. And he will probably have other charges added with that. And that's the first clip we're going to roll.
Okay.
Yeah, Kelly and Bob, James Sullivan says he turned in tips about his brother to the FBI here in Salt Lake City. He says he believes that his brother was not only involved in the riot at the Capitol, but somehow in charge.
Also, want to support the Black community out here too in the best way that I can. That's my belief. I believe the Black Lives Matter. I mean, I'm not here to assert myself and my beliefs on other people. I just want to give people the footage, the video.
The FBI's office in Salt Lake City would not confirm they were investigating Sullivan or any Utahns.
I want to condemn, absolutely condemn the shameful and violence that we saw on January 6th at the U.S. Capitol.
We still love John, and that's something that he needs to know.
Yeah, so in the interest of brevity and interest of not trampling on their copyrights, we had to clip that down. My encouragement would be to go to Channel 13, Provo, Utah, find the story, watch the 2.5-minute video. I'll explain a little bit to you what ends up on the cutting room floor. James Sullivan is his brother of John Sullivan, and James is a Proud Boy. So you have James the Proud Boy and John we're not exactly sure what John is, but we're going to dive into that here in a minute. And James, a Proud Boy, is claiming that John essentially is the mastermind behind the entire Capitol Hill insurrection, of which there is nothing to support that.
Yeah, no, this doesn't seem like the kind of person to me that has the capabilities to construct this kind of organized insurrection. He might have been there egging it on. He might have been there, filming for attention, whatever he was doing. But this whole thing is so bizarre because to me, he's kind of trying to play devil's advocate in the worst kind of way, in ways that are not necessarily useful for anybody. And it's back to what is his end game? What is he really trying to get at here?
Well, his end game right now is probably a jail cell. But when you start connecting the dots, and we're not, again, getting into Charlie of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, trying to figure out the mailroom, he has this crazy chart in the back. This is actually a pretty straight line, but it does kind of end at a question mark at the end. But it's not a good question mark at the end. And so with that, John, nobody knew about him until July when he popped on this scene about creating what he said, bring your guns, and have this violent protest in Utah that ended up with him getting arrested. Now, after that happened, John would be doing interviews with people. And we've got a little bit of this video clip here that's running right now on a tweet. And so he interviewed a person. And as you see in that tweet or maybe an Instagram, they're like, John just promoted this and, put things in writing that I didn't say. So in other words, in promoting this interview, they promoted it as something that this individual didn't say at all. And it was something portraying Black Lives Matter in a very negative light. And allegedly, John is a Black Lives Matter activist. Allegedly.
Again, like I said, this person is playing devil's advocate in the very worst possible way. But why go to the lengths? I know very little about him, but does he identify? He doesn't necessarily, from my understanding, identify as BLM.
That's correct. And we have that in this clip where he's like, I'm supportive of Black people, but he really dances around this issue of Black Lives Matter, this movement of Black Lives Matter. And we got some more clips and evidence we're going to show where when you start to unpeel this onion, you start to go, well, wait a minute, what's actually going on here? John's bad behavior of outing activists, outing people, spurning people on to commit violence, but then disappearing when things happened, not being kind of the commander in his own making, resulted in John being canceled out of Salt Lake City and essentially kicked out by anybody associated with Black Lives Matter at any level. So he did what any other rational person would do after that. Oh, no, he didn't hang his head and say, okay, I've been kicked out. He went to Portland and stirred his special brand of trouble there in Portland and was canceled there. He then tried to go to Los Angeles and Seattle, but by this point, everybody was kind of on to the game that he was playing.
So is this potentially him having some kind of thing for, getting notoriety from protest porn. So he just goes and does the antagonizing to get people to do these things that he can put on film and then, promote to advance his own whatever agenda that is.
Well, that's one of the theories, right? Is he a clout chaser, essentially? Is he in this nihilistic view of the world? And he clearly has a nihilistic view of the world. Does he get something emotionally or monetarily out of being this agent provocateur that moves from both the left side and the right side?
Wow. There's so much problematic about that. It seems like maybe now some of this is catching up to him, although it doesn't sound like this is the first time he's been arrested. But I mean, some of again, we're going to show clips later of the Parler stuff where he's in the Capitol with these people, and he's clearly playing both sides, both antagonizing and, trying to get people to rein back. So yeah, this is such an interesting story.
It is. And then he set up this website for, essentially black bloc in a box, right? You can go to this website and you can buy black gear in a box, right? It's protest gear in a box. And the website didn't have any SSL certificate. And anybody who went to that website and bought stuff was doxxed. So again, it becomes this very interesting thing of he set this up. There's no security certificate on it. So anybody can see what the transactions are going. And anybody that was dumb enough to take this bait ended up being doxxed by sites like Antifa Watch.
Wow. That is... How do you expect, I just don't understand, how do you do something like that and engage in that kind of behavior and expect activist communities anywhere to accept you? Because it's not like activist communities, especially in the Pacific Northwest or in the, what's considered the American West more broadly, are disconnected from each other or don't have networks of communication and exchange that they're going to go, hey, this person is engaging in these kind of behaviors. You need to look out, and people aren't going to listen. So yeah.
So one of the things that Rebellion Baby discovered in their research is that he has multiple online personas and multiple Twitter accounts and multiple Instagram accounts. And surprise, surprise, all of these accounts interconnecting to each other and like and follow and share each other. But when you start digging into some of his accounts, you all of a sudden discover, if you look at people he's following and stuff that he likes, there are things that he likes and follows that are deep on the far right wing, like, people that want to destroy the government, people that are in 3%ers and Proud Boys. And he's right on and liking that stuff when you go down into his rabbit hole of his own making.
Okay, so he's essentially trying to play devil's advocate and look like he's supporting both the right and the left, but he's essentially far right.
Potentially. Now, when he was in the Capitol, Jennifer, he was filming and asserting that he was there as a citizen journalist. But guess what? He was being filmed. He was being followed by a documentarian crew that's making a documentary about John Sullivan. And in one of the comments that he makes in the rotunda, we're not going to play that clip, but one of the comments that he makes in the rotunda when they get in there is he basically tells the person filming them, and I guess this individual in some way is connected to CNN. I can't quite remember how at the moment, and I don't want to get it wrong. So I'm just going to say that individual is somehow connected to CNN, but they're not there. They were not there in the capacities as CNN reporter. They were there as a cam ops and basically was like, this is going to make you famous, right? This is his reaction in this moment, which just immediately kind of goes to, wow, dude, you kind of sound like a narcissist.
Yeah, just a little bit. Narcissistic sociopath. So yeah, that's particularly interesting because I'd been reading something about that last week. And this person is I believe it's a female, is super sympathetic to him. And it's a very kind of interesting, because I was reading, I was like, this is very, very strange, especially, from what I've heard about him. So I'm kind of interested to see how that documentary pans out. especially relative to some of the more in-depth research that's been done?
Well, what's interesting is Max Blumenthal uncovered some things today that he shared. And it turns out that on this documentary, there are some very deep backers. And one of the backers behind this is Thor Halvorsen. And guess what? Thor Halvorsen is a neoconservative operator in kind of the same vein as like a Project Veritas.
Oh, wow.
And he is one of the primary backers of this documentary.
You have to like sit back, and I know it's very like kind of tinfoil hatty and, you know, rabbit holey sounding. You have to sit back and wonder how all of this is potentially interconnected and how deep it goes, and then feeds into what happened at the Capitol on January 6th.
Yeah, some people, the commenting, are saying that she's actually paid for his trip. And as we revealed in that a clip, and I'll play it again, there are some very deep-pocketed people, including Brian Fogel, who was won an Academy Award for the movie Icarus and also for the movie The Dissident, is also one of the backers, also connected with Thor, which again is this political neoconservative gotcha kind of filmmaker. It is really fascinating. But there's more connections here because we have this dynamic of James and John. And guess what? James and John work together on some things when you start digging through on the socials, including James and John communicating leading up to January 6th. And it's just actually out there in the socials. So did James think that like someone wasn't going to spend a little bit of time diving into their Twitters and Instagrams and start connecting the dots? I mean, apparently he did.
Are these like the worst double agents ever? I'm curious. Like it's astounding to me, these people that think they're so clever and do all of this stuff on social media think that people aren't also equally as clever, if not more so, and don't understand how research works and how easy that stuff is to find.
It really is stunning. And then we have this where John actually platformed the Proud Boys and was also seen with Thad Cisneros outside of the Washington, D.C. Hilton after the insurrection on January 6th. He was then questioned shortly thereafter, John, by the FBI and released about an hour later. So now the question has to be asked. How on earth could a alleged Antifa, BLM, destroy them all, burn it down to the ground activist be chilling at a restaurant with one of the senior people in the Proud Boys and walked away from that interaction without his face pounded in? I mean, I know what the answer is, but I'm just like, I'm asking it to the audience.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it's like 2 and 2 makes 4. It's essentially that simple.
And then the last thing that we have here is his website, Insurgents USA. And we have this clip, and I may play it a second time. But when you look at that, and I'm going to go ahead and roll that just one more time. When you look at this image, which goes back to this Utah event that caused, which he has scheduled for January 23rd, doubt that's happening now. The one thing that jumps out, there's not a single mention of Black Lives Matter on the page or the event that's coming up on January 23rd.
Wow. Yeah, he's both bad at being a narcissist and B, really bad at doing like covert operations. So I'm guessing a job in the FBI or Navy SEALs or something along those lines is not in his future.
I think the conclusion that is really hard, I think you can conclude this. John is not for Black Lives Matter, does not represent Black Lives Matter. John certainly was not the mastermind of of January 6th, Ali Alexander would have a very, very strong opinion in particular on who the mastermind of January 6th is. And if you look at John's personality, if John wanted to play that card, he'd be playing that card because that seems to be his personality.
Yeah, I think if he thought he could take full credit for staging that insurrection and planning it, he probably would. It's interesting to me, though, there are people actually coming out and wanting to take credit for that. Who wants to, actually be proud and assume responsibility for planning and organizing a potential traitorous, seditious overthrow of the U.S. government?
The one thing that's undeniable, regardless of John's politics or affiliations, because it appears, in essence, he has no affiliations and he has no politics. He was involved in an attempted overthrow in the U.S. government. That part is undeniable. He is, through his words and actions, a contributor to the death of domestic terrorist Ashley Babbitt. That also is undeniable. And by his actions, he is at least indirectly responsible for the death of at least 2 police officers. And if we count the 2 people that were arrested and killed themselves after the FBI arrested them, 6 domestic terrorists.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He is totally both complicit and culpable and needs to be held accountable for these actions, which is probably not how he thought this would pan out. And so I'm really curious to see how the documentary frames that.
If documentary ever sees the light of day, because that's the other question I think starts to pop up in all of this. The one thing that I will say, I certainly wouldn't trust anything that comes out of John Sullivan's mouth. I just say that objectively.
Yeah. He's proven himself time and time again, both, actions, words, and things that are still in print on social media, not to be a very trustworthy character.
If you want to read the entire Twitter thread, there's a 43 tweet thread. It's a long read. I recommend you get a Threadripper or a Thread reader. You can actually, there's websites. You can just drop the link in and it'll just aggregate it into a simple reader. Rebellion Baby is the Twitter handle. You can go check out that and you can read all of their research. You can also search for Max Blumenthal and you can look for the research that they've done. We've aggregated all of that information together. And we will be clipping this in this segment and offering it up as a story. And with that, I want to do a thank for our patrons and we'll go to our last story.
Okay.
Said, hey, we're going to have to start moving people. And then a couple other people came in and we were like...
The police to be held accountable for their actions. We're not going without. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace.
That's a small clip to our documentary, Can You Hear Us? It will be previewing to our subscribers on Patreon on January 25th. It'll become available publicly in February. If you want an early preview of Can You Hear Us that includes never seen before video and commentary and tells the story of what happened in Seattle from June 1 to July 4, you can become the patron. You go to Patreon, look for the Malcontent for as little as $5 a month. It helps us continue to bring independent media to you. It's just so weird, right? It's like, hey, we're going to do the insurrection update, and it's the last story. So I think the first thing, Jennifer, is Donald Trump has the bigly, huge, amazing distinction of winning twice. He is the first president in United States history to be impeached twice.
Oh, yes. I love history. So he's like at 50%. Behind Andrew Johnson during Reconstruction and Bill Clinton. You've got to be pretty bad to get impeached twice. And it looks like there's potential for there to be a conviction in the Senate as well, which would actually make him the first to be impeached through the Senate, which is also super historic. So I'm excited about that because the other, of course, Clinton's impeachment and Andrew Johnson never, they were acquitted by the Senate.
It's very interesting because there is going to be an impeachment trial in the Senate, and something that's jumping out to me is there's like literally not a single attorney except for maybe Dershowitz that's kind of like, okay, I'll do it. I know that Rudy was on the table to do it, but Donald Trump just said, yeah, don't pay Rudy.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and did Rudy really think that he wasn't going to end up one of the I didn't get paid by Donald stories? And it's interesting to me. I remember when I was younger, what a big name Alan Dershowitz was. He was taught at an Ivy League institution. He was pretty well renowned legally. And, since I don't know where his mind has gone or if he has always been like this, but this whole kind of like fervent support of Trump, kind of guised behind this First Amendment argument is really kind of mind-boggling to me, because I was reading earlier today that that's what they were going to use as a defense, is that his speech is protected underneath the First Amendment.
Which, it's an interesting defense, because then you kind of get into, was it Thurgood Marshall that said, "I'll know pornography when I'll see it"?
Mm-hmm.
Is that his quote out of the Supreme Court?
I think so. I would have to look it up for sure.
Right. And I think that's really what it comes down to. I think the central argument is on the First Amendment, you can't stand up in a crowded movie theater, which I know in the age of COVID sounds ridiculous, but you can't stand up in a crowded movie theater and scream fire. Of course, in 2021, you can't stand up in a crowded movie theater and scream active shooter. So like we know that there's certain things that aren't protected. What I think Donald Trump is going to try to do is wrap himself in the warm, fuzzy blanket of, look, I started with say, be peaceful, and then just ignore the entire hour after that, where I basically told them, fight for me, go down there, I'm going to march with you, blah, blah, blah. We're going to take this, you got to fight, yada, yada, yada. Like, that part didn't happen. I told them to be peaceful.
Yeah, so it's actually Justice Potter Stewart that said that.
Justice Potter Stewart, thank you so much.
Stewart, Potter, just for clarity. So this whole, the lengths to which the First Amendment is going to have to be litigated is pretty intense, because it goes back to that question again, then, is hate speech potentially protected underneath the First Amendment? That's a huge question, and I think they're really going to have to continue to, oh God, I'm frozen in like the worst possible frame. They're really going to have to, litigate this in very interesting ways.
Well, the other thing as part of the insurrection update is there were moving trucks seen today at the White House, and people saw what looked like furniture coming out of the White House. So there is kind of this belief that Donald Trump and Melania are packing up and getting ready to move out. And of course, there's a fair number of jokes about, has somebody accounted for all of the silverware and paintings on the walls?
Yeah, I know, because what was it? They were showing earlier, like a bust of Abraham Lincoln going out of there. And then one of, I can't remember, his chief of staff, Mark Meadows' wife, was carrying out a taxidermied bird. Just, yeah. So it's interesting. And somebody had been telling me before, they thought it was super interesting that potentially, they thought Trump would take items of value out of the White House. So I'm wondering if that's actually going to come true.
Yeah, we'll have to see. The other thing that's interesting in the insurrection update is this goes back to the Chuds.
Chud. Cannibalistic, humanoid, underground dwellers.
They really like to talk a big game about, we're ready and yada yada, but there's growing word that with 25,000 armed U.S. troops, I say U.S. troops, they're National Guard, but they're armed and they have been authorized to use lethal force under military rules of engagement, which basically would be don't fire until fired upon first. And there's a lot of word going that the Chuds are going, yeah, you know what, we're really big and we're brave. Yeah, okay, no, wait a minute. I guess not.
So apparently, rain quashes their plans, and anybody that might use any kind of force against them. So yeah, I'm curious to see too how that pans out. And I think you were on to a good kind of theory the other day when you were talking about, there's all this, buzz about what could potentially happen. So they put all these forces in place. And so now nothing big is going to happen. And then the far right can say, hey, we told you so. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah, the big concern now is what's going to happen at the state capitals. But of what we have seen so far in Washington State with the session was there, miserable weather, 750 armed National Guard troops. And they decided 20 of them showed up. And one of the 20 was Crazy Matthew from Seattle, who we talked about earlier, who got himself arrested because he was annoying the Chuds too much.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. I mean, how would they organize? Because who's going to want to take responsibility and pay for their trip again and bust them in? And, Airbnbs are closed down and there's all these limitations on who can be in Washington at this particular moment in time. I just don't see the same level of organization being there like there was for the insurrection on the 6th, unless they've got T-shirts made, and then we should really look out.
Well, and that's also been discussed by some of the counterterrorism experts and FBI in that kind of pulling the plug on Pollard, dropping the hammer on the Q accounts, the hardcore hate accounts, the neo-Nazis accounts, the fake accounts, and the bots. They have, in a sense, cut off a lot of the communication machine for national coordination. The concern that those same experts have is at the state level, this is more like text when I say text, it's Signal, it's Telegram, and they have more of a direct communication network and operate as smaller terrorist cells.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because I'm wondering, have they had to divert national, the National Guard in some ways to account for the potential violence on the U.S. Capitol? And will that potentially leave some of the state capitals less protected?
Well, certainly that's a question you have for states like Maryland and Virginia, who have significant deployments to support those particular states. I haven't looked to see if Pennsylvania has deployed anything, because that would be a state in my mind where there could be significant risk, just knowing everything that is in that state of their Capitol building getting stormed. Like if I were to be putting bets down, I wouldn't be betting against Pennsylvania.
Yeah, no, and I think that's interesting too. And we were actually having, I edit at a journal at the University of Washington. And so our primary editor is Bruce Havline. He's a historian of science who also I taught U.S. military history with, and we were talking this morning about these local far right extremist groups like the Proud Boys, like the 3%ers, thinking that they have the right to organize as militias. And so we were talking about in the state constitution that you can't actually technically organize as a armed militia without being sanctioned by the state's governor. So it's just kind of interesting to me the ways in which these people either don't understand or have interpreted the Constitution to fit their agenda.
On the sidewalk, guy said Pennsylvania should get the Amish out there to build a fence around the Capitol because they would be able to build it efficiently and quickly.
Yes, absolutely.
I think he wins the internet tonight. On the subject of insurrection, there's a lot of people on Parler that just don't seem to understand that if you're going to go and overthrow the government, filming yourself trying to overthrow the government is not so smart.
No, it's really not.
And when Parler lost Okta to handle their security, everything essentially just became free and in the wild. And Parler didn't pull the plug. They continued to operate without Okta security. This enabled people to just go in and create multitudes of administrator accounts, which they then just use the administrator accounts that they created because Parler's security was so bad to download all of the post history, including, say, if somebody had deleted a post or edited a post, as well as pictures and videos. It gets worse. Pictures and videos have something called EXIF data on them, EXIF, which has the camera brand, model, serial number, which then goes right, identifies to the person's camera in their hand, time, date, and GPS coordinates. Now, if somebody had all of that information turned on by accident, and say you upload that to Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, those sites scrape that EXIF data off. Parler didn't. And so what's happened is that people are now building these interactive maps that now will be able to go to in a few more days and click on a point and then watch the Parler video or see the picture that was taken at that exact geographic point. In the case of videos, Jennifer, about 1 million videos uploaded, 64,000 of those, so 6.4%. People need to turn the EXIF data off. Very interestingly, that includes 4 videos out of the East Precinct in Seattle.
Oh, how convenient. How convenient.
Those might be interesting videos to see. Now, I say interesting, they very well could be nothing, right? We don't know. It very well could be nothing. It very well could be, hey, here's the protesters outside, or it could be something very insightful. But we know that there's 4 videos based on that map that are in there. But the first videos that hit are the videos that were shot in the Capitol on January 6th, and they've been made public. I have spent more time than a human being should have to spend watching this. It's awful. And with that, we've made a compilation of some of these video clips. I will say there isn't anything particularly horrible in any of this. There's certainly nothing like the shooting of Ashley Babbitt or anything like that. I will put just a little casual warning here. Some people have maybe experienced a lot of protest violence, might have some issues in what they're about to see, but I'm going to go ahead and roll the clip. And this is going to be a good time. If you've got questions, mods, admins, I have seen a couple of questions go by. We've had a lot of comments going. Not quite yet, mods and admins, but when the clip is over, if you could start slapping those questions in, that'd probably be good for Jennifer and I.
We literally just got on the Capitol lawn.
Let's go! Let's go!
Let's go, girl!
Let's go! Fuck Biden! Fuck Biden! All Americans for Trump!
Trump 2020!
Our friends, we're on you. Go! Make room! We're coming for you, Nancy! Man, don't do that. What's happening?
Shut the door! Shut the door! Shut the door!
Don't break stuff. You don't want to be liable. Hey, everything's recorded, guys.
No! That's not why we're here!
All right, so this is the crowd. They brought up a huge-ass flag to hang off the side of the staging. Look at the people. Records say that there's 5 million people here. We are at the Capitol. Me and some friends. That's all our friends. Friends! and it looks like they called in the National Guard supposedly, and they're coming in from the back to try and get rid of us out of here. So it looks like we're probably going to start making our way down. We made our point as far as we're not afraid of these people anymore, but it's a Mexican standoff. They just put an emergency alert over the phone and saying that they're closing down DC, and there's a 6 o'clock curfew, nobody on the streets.
Except Antifa, we'll be allowed. The mayor just gave us a curfew.
6 o'clock, right? Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yes.
Yeah. They also told us not to storm the Capitol.
It's amazing.
Put your mask on. I don't want them to see you.
Hey, chill! Stop! Chill! Dude! Hey, we're better than that! Stop! We're better than that!
Defend your Constitution!
1776! Well, guess what? America showed up! Where's the rest of everybody? There's not enough of us. They're going to bring guns in or something.
All right. We could have like an hour unpacking that, and we're actually at 1:30 now, so we don't have an hour to unpack this. I'm going to give you my 3 fast reactions here. Number 1, we could hear the emergency broadcast system going off on people's cell phones. So this conspiracy theory that they turned off the cell phones is killed by Parler users' own videos. That's my first number 1 reaction. Number 2, there's like 5 million people here. The population of Washington, D.C. is 800,000 people. 5 million people would be like the entire city of Houston surrounding the Capitol. It's just like, dude, you got to work on your ability to estimate crowd numbers. And then my third reaction will go to the very, very opening clip, which is of this woman that I called when I put it up on Twitter, feeling hella cute, think I'm going to film myself breaking federal law, maybe talk to the FBI later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that video is insane to me. To be in the middle of that. And of course, you know, we talked a little bit earlier about John Sullivan is like all over in that. But yeah, that got me to the whole crowd size estimation. There's 5 million people there. Did they estimate there was like a few thousand, something along those lines?
They're saying 8,000 at the Capitol, and up to maybe 1,000 inside.
So yeah, 5 million people coordinated to that degree would have overthrown the government. So whatever there.
Hey, can one of the malcontents look up real quick? How many soldiers in the U.S. Army? Because I don't think it's 5 million.
What's interesting too is, you know, there's that whole antagonizing, but the one that got me is when they're like, no, stop. We're better than this. And the guy leans in, pulls down his mask and says, no, we're not.
Yeah, exactly. That says so much in that clip. And I think what you're seeing there, right, there was also this debate. We're inside. We don't know if this is a conference room or an office. We see a window is already broken when they come into there, when they're doing that shot there. And again, there's this debate on whether to, break in or not. There's another video. I did contact that person because they own that video. And we really try to be respectful of stuff that isn't in the public domain. And I never heard back from them. And so maybe we can link to it up on our page or something. This is a real terrifying video. It's about 2 minutes, 17 seconds long. And it's people that are in there and they stop and like they've got maps and they're like, okay, where are we at? And they are clearly coordinating on the offices they want to target and where they want to go and what's on this floor and what's on that floor and how people need to split up to get to it. And this is a real smoking gun of advanced planning.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it goes back to that too, the claim that was made, and I can't remember who it was yesterday, made the claim that there were people taking reconnaissance tours the day before the insurrection. And there were, lawmakers actually leading them around. So you have to wonder, I mean, again, it sounds tinfoily, rabbit holey, kind of a little bit crazy, but you have to wonder how deep this goes and how many lawmakers were actually coordinating to try and overthrow their own government.
1.3 million soldiers total is what our malcontents are telling us. 480,000, because not everybody, right? Some are in logistic positions, etc. 480,000 soldiers in the capacity of bang bang.
Wow. Yeah.
So apparently 5x the U.S. military, bang bang was there.
Okay, whatever.
In the minds of a chud.
Chud. Cannibalistic, humanoid, underground dwellers.
I mean, things have reached a point, right? You have to laugh about it because otherwise I'm just going to curl up in the fetal position on the floor and start crying about it. So, mods, this is the time to start giving us the questions that have been going by. I see the chat's been super active tonight. I know we've had a great audience. We'll do maybe like 5 or 6 minutes for questions, and then we're gonna call it a night. But this is the time to go ahead and drop those questions in here. There's a ton of debate going on in the size of the U.S. military in the comments right now. The other thing is KD Mudd said, yes, the traitor tours. And there are some serious questions that are being raised, as you brought up, Jennifer, on tours on January 5th. I have seen some stuff where people are saying, there's CCTV videos of this, but I haven't seen any of it released. And so I'm not quite ready to go, look, until there's some more than just kind of these accusations that are floating around right now.
No, exactly. I do think it would explain a lot of how people knew where, hidden offices were and things like that. But I'm with you. Until there's something concrete that comes out, you can't really, it's nothing more than an allegation at this point.
Okay, so Dora had a question, but we answered it. Yes, my view is I really don't know. What the government intelligence experts are saying, what the chatter is coming from some of the right-wing militias. Another interesting fact: militias, armed militia groups that train, practice, have command and control, are illegal in all 50 states, and no state has ever cracked down on any of them. But they are all illegal. So it's a question for me personally, but based on their histories and their patterns, when they face strong resistance, they don't show up. And
I think it's maybe a good time that we stop referring to them as militias and giving that kind of a label any kind of credibility.
There's a question, and I saw when we were playing Nate's video and his use of the word of anarchy, and there was a lot of anarchy in the comments. It's a joke. There was a lot of anarchy in the comments about the use of the word anarchy. I'm going to quote the movie, The Princess Bride. You keep saying that word. I don't think that word means what you think it means. And I don't think that he meant it in the context that people are taking it. I think he meant it in the context of it was chaos, not that this was anarchists. And so if you're asking for my answer is I think some of you are reading way too much into his use of the word. That's my 2 cents. I call it as I see it. Any other questions? Oh, wait a minute. We got a question. What benefit do the insiders' government get by overthrowing the government? How do corporations benefit from autocracy? Well, this is an interesting question. This was something that we observed as our nation's capital was under siege. The stock market was going crazy, and it went up even more the next day. And what I heard is like, well, because they threw them out, a Biden administration means that we'll get more economic stimulus, and that's good for the economy, and that's why it's going up. In a logical, functional world, I would think that the stock market would just be collapsing, at least this is going on in real time. What's the benefit do they get? Well, how much do they already control as it is? Because we see a lot of corporations lining up right now going, Yeah, we're suspending our contributions to the Republican Party, and the Republican Party is shitting their pants over it. Like, this is the thing that Mitch McConnell's upset about. Mitch McConnell isn't upset over the insurrection. Mitch McConnell is upset over the damage that Donald Trump has done to the fundraising mechanism to the Republican Party and for losing the Senate. He is absolutely blaming Donald Trump for what happened in Georgia.
Yeah, they're really, really worried about that loss of money right now. And then again, going back to that question of what do lawmakers gain by overthrowing their own governments, if these are far-right GOP lawmakers that are engaging in this, they're going to, if they're successful, be in Donald Trump's eternal good graces. And that alone has its benefits for keeping them in power. It's all about staying in power.
Yes. Exactly. And maintaining that power, because as we've said many times, the United States of America, in my lifetime, Jennifer, in your lifetime, we're going to become the minority from a race when you combine all of the other races together. And that scares the bejesus out of white male America. Yep,
exactly. It's the same fear they had during the Civil War and Reconstruction and, before that, when during the Revolution, they were promoting this fear of pan-Indian and pan-slave alliances that went into the War of 1812 and went on. It's always been that fear of we're going to become the minority and they're going to treat us the way we treated them.
Yes. There's a lot of questions about where's Yoda tonight. Yoda's downstairs, probably wondering when he's going to get fed and if I'm ever going to come downstairs again. And yes, Yoda is celebrating his birthday today. Yoda is 17 years old. He's 1 year away from being able to vote. Just kidding, Chuds. But he certainly would probably be a better voter than some people in how they vote today. I guess we would just leave the ballot on there and it'd be wherever he pooped. That would be the thing that he voted for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, happy birthday, Yoda.
Yes. And I think with that, because we're over time, what else is new? We're over time. I think this is the part where we say happy trails and good night. If you have not done it already, if you like independent media, no, I'm not calling out for money. This is the opportunity to like, follow, whatever channel you may be on. We're on Twitter at Malcontentment T. You can follow us there. We're a very active Twitter channel over there. You can, of course, on Facebook, we're at Malcontentment. You can look for Malcontent News, and you can like and follow us there. Please like and follow us there. We are not clout chasers. We are not like, I'm not Katie Davis going, I lost 17,000 followers because they turned all the Russian bots off overnight. That's not how we roll here. However, we could do a lot more as an organization when we get to 10,000 followers on Facebook, and we're getting close. So I'm going to start pushing, please, Facebook, follow us. Twitch, you can subscribe, you can follow. It is one of the easiest ways that you can spread the love. And one last thing is we're going ahead and shutting this down for the night. Spam those hearts. Let those mods and admins know that you appreciate all the hard work they do. Jennifer, thank you for another wonderful show. We will be back for Martin Luther King Day.
Yay. Happy Monday, or have a good weekend, everybody. I'm tired.
I think we're all kind of tired. Yeah. And with that, I'm going to say Malcontent out. Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with 3 key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live, as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals, including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a Malcontent.
You fit the profile. You're the Malcontent.
Nobody wants to hear the nonsensical ravings of a loudmouth malcontent.
Fuck you! You are the biggest hypocrite on the face of the planet.
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say.